Imagine stepping off a rickety wagon in the wild Ozark hills of Missouri back in 1872, with nothing but your family, a few tools, and a head full of old-world secrets that everyone around you thinks are downright foolish. And as the cold wind whips through the trees, you start digging into the earth, not for gold or shelter in some fancy way, but to build walls from mud that folks laugh at, calling it backward and bound to crumble, yet deep down, you know it's going to change everything they think about surviving. The brutal winters that can freeze a man solid overnight. That's exactly what happened to Christian Bauer, a sturdy German immigrant who arrived in Stone County with his wife and 3 kids. Eyes set on carving out a life in this untamed land where settlers were scrambling to build fast and strong against the elements. But Bauer was unlike the others. He didn't rush to chop logs or fire up bricks like his neighbor Samuel Bradley, a proud brick mason who'd come from back east with his Kiltons and his certainties, mocking Bauer's plans from the get-go as some relic from the old country that wouldn't last a single rainstorm, let alone the snowdrifts that piled up to your waist. Bauer, though, had grown up in the Black Forest where his grandfather taught him the art of cob building, a method as ancient as the hills, mixing clay-rich subsoil with chopped straw and water to create something monolithic and unyielding. And as he surveyed the land that spring, he rejected spot after spot until he found the perfect clay pit 3 feet below the topsoil, where the earth was sticky and red, paired with tall prairie grasses that provided long fibers for binding, because he knew from generations of trial and error that the ratio had to be precise, 70%. Clay to 30%. Straw to make walls that would uncrack or wash away. And he tested it right there by forming a ball and dropping it from shoulder height, watching it hold its shape like a promise of warmth to come. As the weeks turned into months, Bauer and his family worked tirelessly, excavating the clay in wheelbarrows and trampling it with their bare feet to mix in the straw, turning it into a dough-like mass that they layered onto a stone foundation, building up walls that started 22 inches thick at the base and tapered to 18 at the top. Each layer left to firm up before the next was added, sculpted smooth with hands and wooden floats, embedding flat stones for extra strength. And while the neighbors gathered to watch and whisper, Bradley especially couldn't hold back his scorn, striding over one afternoon with his arms crossed, declaring that real men built with brick fired hot in a kiln to withstand anything. Not this childish mud pie that would melt in the first downpour or shatter in the frost heaves of winter. But Bauer just smiled quietly, knowing the thermal mass of those thick earthen walls would absorb heat like a sponge and release it slowly, evenly, turning the whole house into a living radiator. And he even designed a smaller fireplace, just 20 inches deep and 30 inches wide, built right into the wall at floor level so the hot stones could feed directly into the earth around them, maximizing every bit of warmth from the fire. By October, the cabin stood complete, 18 by 20 feet, with a thatched roof and windows framed in salvaged wood, the exterior coated in lime wash to repel the weather while the inside stayed bare for that radiant glow. And as the first chills of autumn set in, Bradley invited himself for an inspection, poking at the walls and shaking his head, betting Bauer a week's worth of firewood, but his primitive heap would make it through the season without collapsing into a soggy mess. But Bauer took the bet with a grin, hinting that come January, when the mercury plunged to -12, Bradley might be the one begging for tips on staying warm. Little did they know, the winter of 1872 to 1873 was shaping up to be one of the harshest on record, with blizzards that buried fences and froze rivers solid, setting the stage for a showdown that would test not just their cabins, but everything they believed about progress and tradition. What if the old ways weren't just surviving, but thriving in ways the new world had forgotten? As the first snowflakes dusted the Ozark valleys in late November, the settlers of Stone County braced for what the almanacs predicted would be a punishing season, with winds howling down from the north like angry spirits and temperatures that could dip so low they'd crack iron tools in half. And while Samuel Bradley stocked his brick cabin with cords of split oak, confident in his modern build with its tight joints and convective heat that rose quick from a roaring fire, Christian Bauer went about his days with a quieter assurance, tending a smaller woodpile because he trusted the cob walls to do most of the work, absorbing the day's sun and the evening's blaze to hold on to warmth long after the flames died down. But the real tension built as December gave way to January, when the cold snapped in earnest on the 12th. Dropping to -12 degrees Fahrenheit and blanketing everything in a white hush that tested every structure in the hollow. That night, as families huddled close, Bradley kept his fire stoked until midnight, feeding it steadily to chase away the chill, while Bauer let his burn out by 10, relying on the earthen mass to carry them through. And come dawn, whispers spread through the community as folks compared notes. Bradley's place had cooled off quicker than expected. forcing him to rise early and restart the blaze. Whereas Bauer's family slept soundly in a cabin that still hummed with residual heat, measuring a steady 53 degrees inside against the brutal freeze outside, sparking the first real doubts in Bradley's mind about his so-called superior methods. Eager to settle the score once and for all, Bradley marched over to Bauer's door on the 13th, proposing a fair test that would pit their cabins head-to-head under identical conditions. Starting that very evening with fires built from the same woodlots oak, burned from 6 to 10 p.m., without overnight tending, and temperatures checked at midnight, 3 a.m., 6 a.m., and 9 a.m., using mercury thermometers borrowed from the local doctor to ensure accuracy. And though the cabins were roughly the same size, Bauer's 18 by 20, Bradley's 16 by 22, with similar insulation in roofs and floors, the difference lay in the walls themselves, where Bauer's monolithic cob acted like a thermal battery, storing energy in its dense clay and releasing it gradually for uniform radiant heat. That kept variations to 8 degrees or less across the room, versus Bradley's brick that relied on air circulation, creating hot spots and cold drafts with swings up to 20 degrees. As the test unfolded over those frigid nights, with outside temps hovering at -14°C, the results stunned the onlookers at midnight. Bauer's cabin held at 64 degrees Fahrenheit, while Bradley's had already dipped to 56, a full 8 degrees cooler. By 3 a.m., it was 58 versus 47. The gap widening as the brick lost heat rapidly through convection. Come 6 a.m., Bauer still clung to 54 against Bradley's 61, meaning his family could wake to comfort without rushing to relight the fire. And even at 9 a.m., the difference persisted, proving the cob's superiority in buffering swings and providing steady warmth. Not only did the temperatures tell the tale, but the fuel efficiency sealed it. Bauer used just 28 pounds of wood to reach a peak of 68 degrees. Compared to Bradley's 45 pounds for the same, a 40% savings that over a 120-day winter meant Bauer burned 3,360 pounds total against Bradley's 5,400, sparing over a cord of wood and countless hours of chopping, all because the earthen walls turned every log into lasting energy rather than fleeting bursts. As word of the tests rippled through the settlement, with folks bundling up to visit and feel the difference for themselves, Bradley had to swallow his pride, admitting over a shared pot of coffee that maybe the old German ways had something to teach the new Americans. But as spring's thaw approached, questions lingered. Would this revelation stick, or fade like footprints in the mud? And what if more settlers tried it? Could it reshape how they all faced the frontier's fury? With the last snows melting into the Missouri creeks come March 1873, the air buzzed not just with the return of birds, but with talk of Christian Bauer's victory, as Samuel Bradley, ever the pragmatic mason, didn't waste time sulking. Instead, he sought out Bauer's guidance, spending afternoons at the cob cabin learning the mix ratios and layering tricks, and by April, he set to work on his own earthen home, opting for even thicker 24-inch walls and an integrated firebox that hugged the structure like an embrace. And when winter rolled around again, his fuel needs dropped by 43%, turning him from skeptic to evangelist as he shared the technique with his sons and neighbors, proving that sometimes progress means looking back to move forward. Soon, the Grierson brothers down the valley followed suit, digging their clay pits and trampling the mix with laughs about how they once pitied Bauer's mud heap, only to find their new cabin stayed warmer with half the wood, easing the burden on their aging father who no longer shivered through the nights. And even widow Margaret Hendress, struggling alone on her plot after losing her husband to fever, halved her firewood labor by building a smaller cob dwelling that year, her walls radiating comfort like a mother's hug, allowing her to focus on her crops instead of endless chopping. And by 1874, at least a dozen such structures dotted the landscape within 30 miles, each one a testament to how one man's stubborn faith and tradition sparked a quiet revolution in a land obsessed with the new and the fast. Bauer's original cabin, that humble 80-by-20 fortress of earth and straw, stood proud until 1919, outlasting floods and storms that toppled log homes and cracked brick ones. Its walls still sound when it was finally dismantled for a road, a symbol of resilience that echoed through the generations as families passed down the stories around dinner tables, reminding kids that true strength often hides in the simple things, like clay from the ground mixed with patience and know-how. And Bradley, before passing in 1891, often reflected in his journal about rediscovering wisdom he'd dismissed as primitive, teaching his descendants to question the rush toward modernity and honor the earth's gifts. This tale from the Ozarks isn't just about beating the cold, it's a lesson in humility, innovation born from necessity, and how cultures clash and blend on the frontier, where German cob met American ambition and birthed something better. influencing building practices that lingered in rural Missouri long after, even inspiring later movements towards sustainable homes that echo those monolithic walls in their quest for efficiency and warmth without waste. Showing us today that perhaps in our high-tech world, we've got a thing or two to learn from those who built with their hands and the land beneath their feet. If this story of forgotten ingenuity fired you up like a well-stoked hearth, hit that like button, subscribe for more dives into history's hidden gems, and drop a comment below. What's one old trick you think could outsmart modern tech? Let's keep the conversation warm.